One.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 231. What do the Twitter files mean for the MRM? And again, I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren B. and the Doge in Charge, Brian Martinez. We're hoping to get a Karen later. For some reason, we've lost contact for a minute, so we'll see what happens there. But hopefully she who must be obeyed will also be she who must be on the show. Otherwise, I'm going to razz her about it because she did tell me she would be here. But we do have the Doge in Charge, Brian Martinez, here to help me out. And it's because I'm still rustier than the woke establishment's handle on the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And tonight we're going to talk a bit about that rust and where it falls on us as the rest of the social media community learns what we've known about for quite a while. But first, we got to do what we got to do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. So tonight, what we're going to talk about, the Twitter files have a lot of interest to a lot of people. Our particular interest in it is how has this affected us, and how does this affect the men's rights movement? What exactly is our particular interest in what has been happening in the past few years in regard to Twitter's censorship, its relationship to the U.S. government, the balance of censorship, and so on? Because we don't necessarily really care about left and right. And we do know that there was some left-right balance in regard to that censorship. But we also know that anti-men's rights interests have labeled us alt-right. So there is that, right? So that's kind of a little synopsis of the setting the stage, I guess you could say, for what I really want to discuss here. But before we get into that discussion, there's a term I want people to understand, and that would be the Cato Institute article, Brian.
All right.
And it's just that first bit of the article where it's the headline and the subheader and the blurb, because the blurb gives the definition.
We're talking about the jawboning today.
Yep, jawboning against speech. And so if you scroll all the way up to the top of that, and it just says jawboning against speech, how government bullying shapes the rules of social media. And it gives a definition. The definition is government officials use informal pressure, bullying, threatening, and cajoling to sway the decisions of private platforms and limit the publication of disfavored speech. The use of this informal pressure, known as jawboning, is growing. And jawboning, historically, just so people know, jawboning, I don't think that was limited to speech. Any kind of policy, like jawboning would be a good description for the way that the government pressured financial institutions to cancel people with the wrong political perspectives as well. Mm-hmm. And our blurb in our opener, that harkens back to an actual policy, which I can't remember the name of the policy anymore. It had a really weird name, Operation Choke Point or something. I think Choke Point was the right thing, but that sounds hyperbolic, so I might be wrong. But in any case, that operation, the government actually told financial platforms to block transactions and refuse to do business with organizations that were deemed terrorist. But then they started deeming political perspective organizations that they weren't funding people blowing stuff up. They weren't funding violence or anything like that. Just talking in ways that the establishment didn't like. They started deeming those people terrorists. And then the financial institutions themselves began doing the same thing. And you started to see people, again, who were deemed to be on the right. And that included people who didn't have a left-right perspective, but did have a patriotic perspective as terrorists, as domestic terrorists, and losing their bank accounts, losing their mortgages, losing access to their money, and losing access to the ability then to do financial transactions. So that's the first thing that we saw that told us that there was government interference. It wasn't just ideologues at places like Reddit and at Twitter and Facebook and stuff that were censoring people, that there may be some connection to actual government entities. Mm-hmm. And we sounded paranoid, and we turned out to be right.
Right. And that's what's so amazing about this, the Twitter files, right? Because we always speculate that the government's got to be involved, but you never actually have the proof. Like, you never actually see the connections, right? And now we have that, right? You never get that tangible evidence, and now we have it. Let's see what happens from it. Who takes that information and does what with it? I don't know, but I'm loving the role that Elon is on right now. So.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing as well. Like, Elon Musk took a pretty big risk doing this. People are like, "Oh, he's being so melodramatic and blah blah." No, no. You have to understand, if this involves government agencies, and in particular, if it involves government law enforcement agencies, some things that have happened previously with, establishment politicians. Hey, we have a Karen.
Yay.
Like, the threat isn't just that some dumbass. Well, yeah, the threat Musk faces isn't just some dumbass in a car following him around, right? Mm-hmm. The threat that he has to deal with is that if the Biden administration doesn't like what he's doing, they've demonstrated that they will use the IRS against him. Mm-hmm. They will use the Department of Justice against him. They will use the Department of Homeland Security against him. They can accuse him of all kinds of things, right? Mm-hmm. They can even start going after, his right to be in the United States. They can start going after his business. They, just everything, patents, all of that. So this is not just a minor thing that he's done. This is actually, he's given the people of the United States a huge gift at great risk to himself, because we have confirmation that this jawboning is taking place. And we have confirmation that it is politically targeted against opponents of the regime and people with certain political perspectives. So we look at this, among other things, the regime. I'm going to call it that because, we've had, like, the Democrats have had control over Congress for the most part for most of Gen X's lives, right? They've when they haven't had control, their lack of control has been very slim. And when they have had control, their control has mostly not been very slim. So that's they are the regime. They are the establishment. But they've been anti-family for a long time, and in a conjunction with being anti-family, they've been anti-father for a long time. So there are a number of things that we don't have to be right wing to get on their list. there are a number of things that put us on their list and get us called right-wingers because we don't go along with the regime's narrative on particular things. And father's rights is a big one. Due process is another one. They're also anti-due process. So, but now that we have a Karen, I'm going to give she who must be obeyed an opportunity to speak.
Well, I only just came on, so I don't know what we're even discussing. So
okay. Well, quick reminder. This is when I messaged you before, I messaged you like in the middle of that crazy conversation with shit.
God.
we found an example from that that green text post that had gone around describing different issues of people who are maybe less competent evaluators of things.
Oh, right. Okay.
We found an example. But in any case, we're discussing the Twitter files and their relationship to the men's rights movement, how this information sort of falls on us and what it has to do with us.
Oh, well, okay. So basically, somebody's actually putting the truth out there and people don't like it. People don't want to hear it. Right? That's literally the story of my life. It's the story of my life when it comes to pretty much everything. Is I'm just like, yeah, no, I'm going to be honest. And I'm just going to say what I think because I've looked at everything and here's what I think, and nobody likes it because it's not, I guess it's not fashionable, or it's like it's too mean, or it's just not kind or whatever. I don't give a shit, right? You know, like I'm the kind of person, okay? So we have this new freaking traffic thing. I have to drive this every day, right? Where you have 2 lanes that merge down into one to go underneath a bridge, okay? And every time I get into that lane that I know is open, okay? I'm not one of those assholes who stays in the left-hand lane and races to the front of the line and expects some willing dupe to let them in, right? Yeah. Okay? I'm not that asshole. You know what, though? Every frickin' time it happens, okay? I'm just like, you know what? I'm sitting here in the middle of an intersection blocking traffic because the light's red and I'm stuck in the intersection because of these assholes, right? That everybody's like, you know what? I'm just going to park my fucking car, put my hazards on because that's only polite, right? And I'm going to get my tire iron and go up there. And you know whose windows I'm going to smash? It's not the assholes who are cheating. It's the people, the dumbasses who are letting them in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? And then I'm going to smash all their fucking windows and I'm going to look at the asshole who was cheater who was trying to butt in the front of the line. And I'm going to say, you see what you did? And then I'm going to turn to the other guy who was going to let him in and say, grow a fucking pair and stop being a simp. They only do it because you let them get away with it. Okay,
Yes.
and that's the fucking truth. Right? That's my truth. That's everybody else's truth who's stuck in the back of the fucking line, blocking the intersection. Anyway, enough about my day.
Yeah, that sounds
that's
really specific.
Well, that's actually kind of the way I feel about the idiots that excuse the censorship. Oh, it's safe. It makes us safer. Blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at this, and so we have the lists, the Twitter files themselves, right? The lists of tweets that we have links to, and then we have 4 different articles that I looked at that have points that they've made basically about the things that happen. Reason published one with the headline, Twitter files, FBI DHS reported tweets for election misinformation. Content moderators had weekly confabs with law enforcement officials, reports Matt Taibbi. And that was from, I believe, the first set of Twitter files. And right there, that is a direct violation of the First Amendment. Right?
Oh,
the government
yeah,
is not
no.
supposed to have any control over political speech, specifically political speech. They're like, people have used the First Amendment to fight against censorship of cuss words and anti-biblical blasphemy and sexual language and make it possible for pornography to exist without people getting arrested for creating it, things like that, right? But the actual purpose, the full intention of the First Amendment is for you to be able to criticize the
government.
So if I mispronounced the name, it's Matt Taibbi.
Taibbi.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. In any case, but yeah, for you to be able to criticize the U.S. government without getting arrested, and you can even go so far. There was a comedian that did this back in the 90s it was with Bush Jr., I think. So it would be the early 2000s. But he did an edgy comedy routine where he said a whole bunch of different ways, that it's illegal for you to say that you're going to assassinate the president. But he said it in the first person, which I actually would be not wanting to do that on at least YouTube today, just because of the censorship, right? And just because the Biden administration has been known to weaponize law enforcement against even comedians making jokes, right? But in any case, yeah, this specific censorship is exactly what that amendment was written to eliminate. You're able to tread right up on the line, right up to the line of threatening public officials, and it's covered.
Yeah, no. As long as you don't actually make direct threats,
right,
you're fine. Did anybody watch Nancy Mace rip apart that freaking activist?
Oh God, that was delicious.
Yes. Oh my God! Right, and she's like, "Well, thank you for allowing me to clarify and add context to my tweet, which I think that you're not interpreting it the way." And it literally says, "It's our civic duty to accost the Supreme Court justices whenever we see them in public." That's literally what the tweet says, right? They should not know a moment of peace, right, in public ever again, right? And
Yep.
And it's like, oh no, that's not what I meant. I didn't. You're taking it out of context, and it's like, no, like, you stuttering freaking bonehead. No, nobody is taking it out of context. You meant what you said,
exactly,
right? And you said what you meant. And like, I'm sorry, like, I'm not going to put my hazards on and grab a crowbar and go smash somebody's windows. I just fantasize about it pretty much every day. But I don't. Nobody is going to take me saying something like that. Like I dream. Like, it's the most ridiculous, stupid thing, right, that anybody could do. Especially in Canada, where we're all so polite. Can you shut up, Borat? Jesus, what's wrong with you? Anyway. He wants to go out and see this dog outside, and the dog is spayed, so like there's no point. But anyway, but yeah, no, I'm looking at it, and it's like, no, if you believe that kind of rhetoric, and I don't believe that, over the top rhetoric, like, like my kids were never in fear of me, even when I said I was going to rip their arm off and beat them with it, right? They never felt like scared of me or anything. They were just like, oh, mom, right? But if you genuinely believe that any kind of, harsh rhetoric any kind of incendiary rhetoric, any kind of, and when you look at what they banned Trump for, right? They were like, well, if you translate American patriots into like January 6th rioters, then we could, if that's what he meant by that, not by what he said, but if that's what he meant was the January 6th rioters, then we should remove him because he's inciting them to January 6th riot some more, right? And I'm just like, what the? I got banned 3 years off of Twitter, 3 years banned from Twitter because I asked 3 tweets: "Are you dumb? Are you retarded? Stop being retarded."
And the guy went on to prove later on that the answer was yes.
Yes. Unequivocally.
Unequivocally, yes.
I wasn't even talking to the guy who got me banned. I was talking to some other male feminist, right? Then this other male feminist comes in and he's like, and he starts bragging after I got banned for life. He's like bragging, "Oh yeah, no, I'm the one who got her banned. I take credit for that." And somebody was like, "Well, don't you think that discussion is a better idea?" And he says, "Well, yeah, sometimes, but some of these MRAs are just so awful that I just scroll through their feeds and look for anything reportable." Right? And
he went after me next. He stated that I was a target next.
Yeah, no, and he said 2 down, so many more to go, right? And I'm like, what the? So then I appeal my ban, right, with this information, and they're like, they respond, "Well, we reserve the right to look at an account in its entirety to determine if its primary purpose is to upset other users." It's like, I just got invited to fucking Norway to speak. You fucking hoes. Like, that's not the primary purpose of my account or the things that I say. Is that like you basically slapped a troll sticker on me, right? Oh, just an anonymous troll with no purpose other than to annoy and upset other users on Twitter.
Karen uses her Twitter account to call people duty heads. That's what that's about.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's so offensive. It's much worse than like every other word on my Twitter account.
And then all these fucking people, because like when I came back and I'm like, "Here's why I was banned," and they're like, "Well, you could have chosen better language." Like, fuck you. Fuck yourself. You can go fuck yourself, and then you can go eat your own shit.
Stop letting the asshole in that passed everybody on the road. Right. That's you guys letting the asshole in. That's simping. Right there.
No, I have to take the high road in terms of language. Yeah, I got people calling me all kinds of fucking names. I had frickin' Christy Winters and her little fucking sidekick, whatever the fuck his name was. Remind me. It's been 3 years.
Jeez, I can't remember his name, but they all have me blocked.
Are you talking about
They're
Sean?
scared of.
Sean,
they're scared of all of us now.
Sean, it was like
the one with
Sean and Jen. It was like a skull.
No. The one with the poofy hair.
Oh, God, no! They all have me blocked.
I don't know. Kevin the potato.
Yeah, Kevin the potato. Anyway.
Oh, Kevin Logan. No. Kevin Logan. Yeah.
Thank you. And the two of them were like tag teaming me constantly, and like just absolutely like, and I'm like, should I block you? Like, I don't like to block people, but like this is getting like, they were just like, "Come on here, you grifter, you lying liar, you freaking defamer," and blah. And they were like making accusations of like criminality and stuff, and I'm like, and they're like, "Come on to our live stream. Kevin will moderate it. He'll be fair." I remember when Allison moderated a freaking discussion between me and Kevin Logan, and she finally said, "Okay, Kevin," after about 45 minutes, Kevin, the topic of conversation is not Karen." Right? The topic of conversation is this, and that's what we're supposed to be discussing. right? So can you please leave Karen alone, right? And stop harassing Karen, and then we can get to the actual topic of discussion.
All right, so there's your people who let the assholes in traffic.
Oh
right
God!
Then you have the people who have said,
No, they're the
Karen
assholes.
has to be nice. Karen has to be
I
polite.
have
Karen
to be
has to
polite.
not respond to all of these things, these horrible things these people are saying. Right. Meanwhile, these people are roaring down the passing lane. Past all of the vehicles that are stopped in the speaking lane in Twitter, and cutting in front, cutting people off, getting them stuck in the intersection, or just not letting them on altogether, running people off the road and everything. Oh, you have to be polite. Be polite to the asshole that's trying to kill you. And that's what we've been hearing for. For me at least, in terms of these particular types of arguments, it's been over 15 years.
Yeah.
Because I started talking about this, the due process issues and the father's rights issues on other social media before Twitter existed. So it's been more than 15 years. And I've been on Twitter since something like 2009 or 2010, just like a long time. And I watched Twitter go from an uncensored platform to a lightly censored platform, just a little bit of manipulation here and there, to a heavily censored platform over the course of a couple of years. And it started with a men's issue. It started with the push to get a woman on God, I can't remember it was British currency, and it wasn't euros.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know whether it was the pound.
It was the
or
pound. It was the
£10 note.
10-pound note. 10-pound note.
Right, and there was a heated discussion about it because they were gonna take a man off of the note to put a woman on. And it was virtue signaling. It was never really about doing something for women. Women were not going to get better jobs, or, their pay wasn't going to increase. Their education wasn't going to increase. Nothing was going to happen for women because they put some chick on the 10-pound note. And so it really ended up being very controversial, and a lot of heated exchanges took place on Twitter over this. They tried the same thing in the United States, and it kind of went nowhere for a long time. But the whole point of it, and the whole thing died too in the United States after this. The whole point of it seemed to actually be to get Twitter to put a report button on people's accounts so that you could report the account rather than just reporting individual tweets, and get people banned from Twitter for arguing with you. And there was one guy who broke UK law in his arguments with the woman that was pushing for this, but she acted like she had this horrific pattern of threats that never materialized. There was never any kind of there was nothing that you could actually point to except for this one guy's tweets where she actually had anything actionable or anything scary happen to her or anything. She just was mad that people were arguing with her. And so we got the Twitter report button, and then feminists started arguing that we should be able to report people for things like misogyny and racism and saying rude words and everything. By about 2015, they were suspending people for using terms like cunt and bitch and stuff like that. And then eventually, you had. I got locked for 12 hours for responding to somebody who called me a cunt by calling their tweet idiotic. It's idiotic to respond with that. It doesn't counter anything I said. And they reported me. So I basically...
The word idiotic is actually ableist, so...
Yeah. Well, according to them it was. And I was like, tell me I'm wrong. Like, I said something and they responded by calling me a cunt, did that change anybody's opinion of what I said? And like that doesn't counter it. So I appealed to Twitter, and I linked to the tweet that I was responding to, and they got locked for, like 12 hours or something like that. And all of that happened, like the more it happened, the more I'm like, this is really hindering discussion. This is really hindering the ability to hash out ideas. And now I'm having to be careful how I word things and how I promote ideas and stuff, because, if I say, at one point I've been, I got suspended for saying something about shooting a feminist in the face with my camera, because the hashtag shoot a feminist in the face was trending. And I'm like, yeah, if you come to my door, I'm going to, because there had been people threatening that at that point in time. I might shoot you in the face with my camera, and then I'll have evidence, and we can go to court.
Yeah.
I had to delete that because
God.
it was treated as a threat. And they said people couldn't differentiate between a tweet in which I specifically, explicitly stated with my camera, and a tweet in which I was referring to a gun. So that's how that got shaped. So then you look at the tweets from I have to go back now. I've already forgotten how to pronounce his name.
Matt Taibbi.
Taibbi, like, okay, Matt Taibbi's first set of tweets about, why is this not scrolling, about the Twitter files, and he goes through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in his tweets, and he explains some of this. In the early conception, Twitter more than lived up to its mission statement, giving people the power to create and share ideas and information instantly without barriers. In 2018, they removed that mission statement from their main page. You couldn't find it from 2016. I want to say 2016, but sometime during the Trump administration. From then on, that was gone, right? And he talked about the spam filters and some of the first tools controlling speech designed to combat spam and financial fraudsters. No, some of the first tools to combat speech on Twitter were to stop people from arguing with women.
Yeah.
Who were promoting feminist narratives.
Yeah, because like nobody got stopped from arguing with us.
Right.
So.
And that happened clear back in 2010 to 2012. So, and it was specific to feminist narratives. And that tool was the report button. That's a tool of censorship. Somebody can report you for being rude and obnoxious, and they will suspend you, and you can't talk for 12 hours, right? That's censorship. So then number 8 on this, he says, by 2020, requests from connected actors to delete tweets were routine. One executive would write to another, more to review from the Biden team, and the reply would come back, handled. And he even shows an example, and it has a set of tweets that were specifically flagged by the Biden team. And the reply did come back, handled these. And these are like celebrities and unknown alike, he said, could be removed or reviewed at the behest of a political party. And they noted, like there's one tweet here from James Woods. It shows his name as the account status, the name on the account status and everything. So there are tweets that they just flat out removed. They didn't even tell people to remove them. They just removed them. So I had that happen, and I remember specifically when I had that happen. Milo Yiannopoulos got removed from Twitter after his slap fight with a comedian, and which I kind of consider Milo Yiannopoulos to be a comedian as well.
talking about Leslie Jones?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I believe
when you said comedian, I wasn't thinking of her.
Well, there are times when she's pretty funny. But and honestly, her going off about that in some ways was funny as well, just not the ways that she intended.
Yeah.
But because like she looks really tough, but obviously she's not. But in any case,
yeah. Well,
so he gets banned, and
her brand of humor is basically sassy black woman from the streets, and that's basically the character she plays. So
yeah, and when she's playing that character, she can be funny, but it's definitely a character she plays. But in any case, but yeah, she got him banned, and she admitted that she had him targeted. But after that, he was targeted with a hit piece that took things he said out of context, combined them together, parts of them together, to make it look like he said something that he hadn't said, and then sort of exaggerated the significance and impact of it. And it trended on Twitter, where he wasn't there to defend himself.
Mm-hmm.
So I posted evidence against the narrative. I posted evidence that showed that actually the things that were being spread as Milo Yiannopoulos said specifically this were composite statements, like composite sound files from separate statements at separate times. And in some instances, they took one part of one sentence and combined it with another part of another sentence to make it sound like he said a sentence that he didn't say. And combining those things together and out of the context that they were originally stated changed their meaning. And Twitter removed those tweets, did not suspend me or stop me from continuing to tweet, just deleted them. So when I went back to link to them so I didn't have to post the same thing over and over again, they were gone. So I had to go back, and at one point I tried creating an image file so that I could show people an image with the text. And when I did that, I got attacked by bots. Oh, this is just a JPEG. It's not evidence. Right. And I've used that against other people because they've posted an image where it appears to be text from an article or text from a research paper, but there's no citation, there's no source or anything like that. Mine had sources cited and what's it called? URLs. I always try to say links, but it's URLs that you'd have to type them in because they were on a JPEG. They weren't links, but people would be able to go find the information and see that I was telling the truth. So it's not just a JPEG. But that, once I got flooded by the bots again, a few minutes later, those tweets disappeared. Same thing happened during the Women's March. I had tweets that were related to the individuals running the Women's March and some of the reasons why their credibility was really not good. Those disappeared, just completely disappeared. And it was just an interesting. So I noticed this. So what he's talking about that's been done to the right, that's been happening to us. And I'm sure that there are other MRAs that have seen this same thing. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this. We have to be able to, if we say we want to get equally shared parenting legislation passed in a particular state or in a particular country where currently the courts are more likely to award custody to the mother and visitation to the father, or they'll use a joint custody standard that is essentially custody to the mother and visitation to the father, but the father doesn't have to ask the mother before taking the kid to the doctor. And we want 50-50 shared parenting where both parents have equal time with the child. Both parents then have equal opportunity to work and so on, and all the good things that come with that. And if we want to promote stuff like that, we have to be able to talk about it on social media. Right? That is the place where ideas are exchanged. It is where you can share information. You can link to things like statistics on the benefits of father involvement, not only to children but to the mothers and to the fathers. And you can link to information about the importance of intact families and the importance of cooperative parenting even after a divorce, and how much of a difference it makes when the parents are not at each other's throats. You can link to evidence for parental alienation and what damage it does and stuff like that, but not if you're being throttled, not if you're being censored, not if organizations like White Ribbon Australia can flag your tweets when you point out that actually most child abusers are mothers, and actually in most families domestic violence isn't a problem. It doesn't exist in most families. 3/4 of families are nonviolent entirely, and even in families that do have domestic violence, it's mostly female initiated. So if you start linking to stuff like that, you start posting about stuff like that in conjunction with a push for equally shared parenting, where the arguments against you are arguments that dads are deadbeats and abusers and a threat to their children and all kinds of stuff, and then they can have your tweets removed when you post, no, actually, nobody is automatically a threat, but when one parent is a threat, it's usually the mother. That really hinders your ability to advocate for those changes in legislation, and it really hinders your ability to advocate against the demonization of men.
Yeah. No, that's exactly true, and it's extremely frustrating, right? Because I'm one of the people. I get a fair amount of I got a fair amount of views on YouTube. I had a fair amount of subscribers or followers on Twitter. Like I got a fair amount of attention, but I look at some of the people whose channels have grown, and the rate at which they grow, and it's like, I have to wonder, like, am I being throttled? Am I getting out there to everybody that is interested, right? And there are a lot of people who are interested, like a lot of people. It not just in terms of, like sort of the anti-feminist thing, but also the, let's give men a break thing, like they basically, men are basically the people who keep the lights on, the water running, and the planes from falling out of the sky. And so maybe we should actually start treating them decent instead of shitting on them all the time. And maybe we don't want to cripple the next generation of men, right, who are all in elementary school right now and learning that it's actually probably much more fun to dress like a girl, because if you're a boy, your teacher doesn't like you. But if your Desmond is amazing, your teacher will probably treat you really special.
Yeah, they've skipped right over, being male is bad. It's no longer that. It's not even that you're bad for being born male. It's just, why don't you want to be a woman? Dress up and cut your dick off and it's.
Lauren, how dare you say that they're doing that and talking kids into that?
Well,
they've gone beyond that. They're now at, how dare you say it's wrong? You hate gay people.
I know.
And
no, but here's the thing.
It's really weird to see the LGBT movement go gung ho against conversion therapy until it's used to try to convert children to their side of the gender fence, right?
Until it's being used to convert,
potentially straight people, potentially cis people that are too young to decide.
Yes, cis-sexual, gay people, right? So you're gay, right? But your school has a zero tolerance policy for bullying of trans kids, right? But you're a butch lesbian, maybe. You maybe not. You don't know it. You're in puberty. It's a confusing time. You don't know whether, like, I remember when I was like 14, right? And I didn't have boobs yet. I didn't even have my period yet. And I remember sobbing into my mom's shoulder that I didn't have boobs. And then a year later, when I had boobs so giant they had stretch marks on them because they grew so fast, right? I remember sobbing into her shoulder, complaining about how I didn't want boobs anymore because they were horrible. Okay, like it's a confusing time. Okay, and the last thing you need to do is say, well, hey, we can cut those things off for you, because maybe you're actually a boy. We can take the skin off your forearm and turn it into a penis, if you like. There's only a 67% complication rate for that surgery. You'll do fine.
Yeah. And like you would have been targeted, I probably would have been targeted. Although when I was in school, I was so far in the closet, like people probably could have opened it and got all kinds of stuff out of it and closed the door and never would have known there was a girl in there. Well, I kind of went in after I was victimized, and then I stayed for a very long time. But in any case, I would have been targeted for other reasons. I was very socially awkward. And I mean,
a lot, like this is the thing, is it's a socially awkward kids that are being targeted.
And in particular, autistic girls.
Yeah.
Right? And we didn't know back when I was in high school, if you went to get evaluated for autism, they were looking for Rain Man.
They were looking for the kid who chews his wrists and like bangs his head against the wall and has to wear a helmet all the time.
Right. They were not looking for they weren't looking for the girl that read the encyclopedia for entertainment. Right?
Or sat on the can for 2 hours reading a World of Warcraft strategy manual like my 8-year-old son did.
Yeah. And see, so like I didn't find out until this year. Right? In fact, I didn't find out until the last few months. I mean, I had some suspicions for the last few years because I've been reading about the different ways that it can manifest and how actually gotta credit Richard for a lot of that because he's been sending me articles about there's a push by feminists to turn it into a women's issue. It's not really a women's issue, but how girls go undiagnosed for a long time and for a long time, autism was considered to be a male disorder that affects some girls, but almost none. And it actually turns out that no, we just are pretty good at masking it, especially if we're high functioning.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm 50, and I just find out, I'm a grandma. I've gone through all of the things in your social engagement that normal people do. I dated. I broke up with people I got broken up with. I was parts of groups of friends and all that stuff, right? And got married and had kids and I'm grandma now. And now I find out that all of the times where I thought I was just being the asshole because I missed something and pissed people off, or I thought, I felt sort of like almost I identify with the type of characters that Don Knotts would play because I would just be so, I'd like always dancing to the wrong song, got all the right moves, but I'm dancing to the wrong song, right? And no, I'm just autistic, and so it's kind of freeing to have that diagnosis and everything. But But yeah, I would have been a target, because I was really distressed in school, and I did go for evaluation, and they misdiagnosed me twice. Gave me drugs that were I didn't need, that really fucked me up. At one point, I didn't sleep for 10 days straight. Don't do that ever. It is the hallucinations are horrible. I just it's painful. I won't even go into it, but don't ever try to do that on purpose. It's one of the worst experiences I've ever had in my life, and almost killed me. So yeah, one of my near-death experiences, right? But if I were to have said all of this, say on Twitter a year ago or 6 months ago, I would have been throttled for it. I'm following detransitioners and trans women on Twitter, and they get throttled for different things.
Yeah.
They get into fights with TERFs, and TERFs are mean, just flat out mean. They're not. They're just mean people, honestly. And when I say TERFs, I mean specifically radfems. I'm not talking about the people that get labeled TERFs by trenders, like tradcons. Although tradcons have some problems in their relationship to trans women in particular as well, because they do demonize them, and they demonize men by connection, and that's wrong. But they're not treated equally in the fight there. TERFs will get busted for misgendering, but trans women will get busted down for defending themselves against that kind of behavior, and against allegations of being perverted men. And as soon as they are defending against allegations of being perverted men and allegations of being predatory and stuff like that, they get busted down. They get suspended. They get limited in their speech, especially if they descend to the same name calling that they're being subjected to. And detransitioners, when they talk about their experiences, their thread will start to blow up, and then all of a sudden you can't find it. And it's still got tons of views, but if you search it on Twitter, it doesn't come up in the search. You have to go to their account and dig through their tweets to actually find it, to reference it and stuff like that, and understand what they're talking about. And we should be trying to understand these issues, because this is people's lives. This isn't just a trend or a fun thing, and it's not a treatment that is cut and dried. Like, you break your leg, they put you in a cast, they give you calcium and other nutrients to try to regrow the bones correctly. They give you pain medicine to treat the pain, and unless it's a really complicated fracture, there's a healing process that's pretty well known, right?
Yeah.
But with transitioning, there's a whole other set of psychological issues that go along with it. And the outcome isn't necessarily the same for everyone. It's not predictable for everyone, and it's not necessarily the best treatment for everyone with dysphoria.
Yeah, no. With one of the things is that most people who have gender dysphoria have psychological comorbidities. And like, we're talking clinical comorbidities, like clinical anxiety disorder, clinical depression. Not just I'm feeling depressed, but like actual, the debilitating type of depression and all of that, right? And it's like, I think that for some of them, for some of them, the causality is the dysphoria is causing the anxiety and depression and whatever, right? But for others, like these girls on the autism spectrum who seem to be very vulnerable to this rapid onset gender dysphoria, and then regret it often within a year or two, but sometimes too late to reverse it. It's the comorbidities that are actually driving the dysphoria, right? So they don't feel like they fit in among girls. Well, my daughter didn't feel like she fit in among girls. My kids aren't technically on the autism spectrum. They have something different, but it mimics a lot of the symptoms of autism. including social developmental delays, right? And late speech, but early reading and all kinds of weird stuff like that. But my daughter never felt like she fit in with, you know, the girls. And if she had wanted to be popular, or if she had been gorky enough to get bullied, maybe she would have, maybe that would have distressed her, right? If she'd been one of those girls who really wanted to be popular, right? Really wanted to be among the popular girls, really wanted to, you know, be in that, you know, was very outgoing and really wanted to be part of that. If you were that, and then you had this crippling social anxiety and depression because you're on the autism spectrum and you just don't fit in, right? And then somebody comes along and says, well, have you ever wondered if you're actually a boy? Because, you know, you do seem to get along with the boys more, and because boys are a little bit more upfront and willing to tell you honestly what they think, and girls just do everything in a very sneaky way. But you know, like these girls, I think a lot of these girls that are being kind of roped into this right now, their dysphoria, their gender dysphoria, is not their primary problem. I think it's actually being caused by their primary problems, which are being on the autism spectrum, not fitting in, maybe being bullied, and maybe also being gay, like maybe also having sexual feelings towards other girls. So it's like, well, okay, why aren't we here? Here's the thing, and here's the thing that I've always asked, right? Okay, so you have somebody who's suffering. They think that their body doesn't conform to their gender identity, okay, and you're going to give them hormones, right, to make them feel like the opposite sex. Well, why is our first line, our first approach, cross-sex hormone therapy? Why aren't we trying sex-affirming hormone therapy first?
And see, that would have been a thing that probably would have helped me out, because I've always been higher testosterone than is normal. Like, I'm in the high range,
Yeah.
the high end of normal, like not where they're going to come along and say you have a testosterone issue, but but enough that it would have been, if I had been given female hormones, if I'd had dysphoria, that might have actually made it either tolerable or gone. And now in my situation, I've never felt like I was in the wrong body. I've never felt like a member of the opposite sex, but I have always felt like I wasn't girling right.
Yeah.
That's the best way to put it is, if you've ever been in a setting like a meeting or church or a test in school where you had multiple classrooms all stuffed into the cafeteria or the gym to take this test, and everybody is silent, and you could drop a pin, and not only would everybody hear it, but it's so silent everybody would be able to identify where it fell, and you fart loudly, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how I felt from the time I hit puberty.
Yeah.
Around other women, from the time I hit puberty until I met women who young women who were like me, and I've always had like a couple of friends too that were close to me, and then a crowd of people that, you know, I could hang out with, where I didn't feel constantly like that. But that's my sense being around people all the time. Like, I just let out a loud fart in that silent room full of everybody, you know, and everybody's looking at me. Right?
Yeah.
And I never have been able to get rid of that. Like even right now, I don't feel that way with my co-hosts because there's enough similarity and understanding there. But when I have to deal with women in my workplace, I feel like that.
Yeah.
And in particular, younger women.
Yeah.
They're very like millennial and Zoomer language is very emotional, and I don't understand it. I don't get it. Like the reason I got Karen, you didn't get to hear this, but the reason that I got diagnosed was because I can't communicate effectively with my millennial and Zoomer coworkers, and there were conflicts at work that happened because I was trying to find out if I needed to do some paperwork, and my coworker felt accused of causing an injury that I was just trying to find out if it was the one we'd already done paperwork on. Literally, the Twitter thing happened of I like waffles. What do you mean you hate pancakes? Now, and it was like I didn't say any of that stuff. Like
Yeah.
I didn't do anything that should make this person feel accused.
Oh God.
So the whole difference is she heard emotion in my question that wasn't there.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, yeah, my boss actually asked me if I was autistic when I explained my side of the conversation. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, you're like the 50,000th person that's asked me that. I've had some suspicions, and then I find out there's available tools because I work with people with disabilities. There's tools for people with disabilities to
Who
have
work-
jobs,
Who work with
to help us
people.
have jobs. Right? And I have actually got multiple conditions that are considered disabling conditions. I'm not disabled in terms of inability to work. I've been working since I was 15. But my boss was like, oh, if you get a diagnosis, you can have access to those tools, and there are accommodations we have to make. Go talk to your doctor.
Oh.
Like she's, geared toward working with people with disabilities. So instead of being like, oh, it's going to be a problem, we're going to have to accommodate you, she was like, we can figure out how to make this work. So I'm in a good place for this to happen to me. I don't think this would have happened to me. It would have gone that well if it had happened when I was at the gas station. But yeah, all of that said, like it takes us right back to this. My situation, if I were to talk about my situation on Twitter before the censorship changed, I would have had this. Initially, there would have been a sense of like people noticing what I had to say, and there would have been some discussion, and then it hits a point and it drops off. And it's not that people lose interest in the discussion, it's that people can't find it. And the reason I know is that I've had that experience with conversations I've been in with other people with similar experiences that looked into gender dysphoria and were like, well, no, that's not what's going on with me. I don't feel like the opposite sex. I feel awkward and judged around my sex, not because I'm not a member of my sex, but because there's a consensus on the normal way to be my sex, and I'm not meeting it.
You don't girl right.
Right, I don't girl right. And I can, like, if I work really, really hard, I can do it. I can even be a lady.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
But like, I seriously can. I know how to be a lady. I just don't like it.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I don't either.
So,
and
but
my
I do
mom
like being female. I love being a woman. I love being a mom. I love being a grandma. And it's great, and I will always love that. So I'm not, but I couldn't say that on Twitter a year ago. And we have to be able to say that, because can you imagine what I would be telling you now if I had gone through that kind of surgery? Can you imagine what it would have done to the lives of my family members to see me go through that? Can you imagine what it would have done to my husband?
Well, you wouldn't.
I might be divorced right now if something like that happened.
Oh, if you had been approached in elementary school
I
and
might
given
never
the
have gotten
option,
married.
yeah,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have gotten, and you'd chosen that path for yourself. You wouldn't have gotten married. You would have transitioned maybe before you were even 18, surgically and hormonally.
And I would have had
And
it been taken away from my parents because they would not have just allowed that to happen.
yeah,
Mhm.
and like this is the thing that I always tell people, right? Like, it's like I was a tomboy. I was very much a tomboy. All of my best friends were boys, and except for one, and she was my cousin, so I kind of had to be her friend.
Right.
And she's a very active person too, right? Like she mountain bikes and does all kinds of like camps and stuff like that, right? Like she's a very she's not a brunch and baby shower kind of girl. She's a cargo pants kind of girl,
Mm.
and
I'm
which is probably
actually
why
wearing cargo pants right now.
there you go. And so it's probably why we got along. And but like, so if somebody had come up to me, when I was in elementary school and said, well, you ever really wonder if maybe you're actually a boy? Like, did you know that you could become a boy? Right? Like, I don't know what the fuck I would have done. Right? Because you're a little kid. You're a little kid, and somebody tells you you don't have to be tethered to reality. Right? Anything is possible. Like, you can't, like, do these people not understand anything about early childhood development? Right? That you
Yeah.
actually have to teach your child what is real. Otherwise, they end up jumping out of a freaking 20-story window thinking that they're Superman and they can fly.
Or you can throw yourself at the ground and miss. Because I was a kid when I read the Hitchhiker's Guide. So,
yeah, well,
yeah. I did not break my arm.
All I know is that when these kids are still developing, they don't even have a sense yet of what all is real in the world yet. Right? They still might think there are monsters in their closet.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so, and then you're going to introduce this idea that, well, your penis isn't actually real. It doesn't make you a boy, right? You could be a girl, and just get rid of that thing, and we'll make you a little pouch, and it'll work just fine. You'll have to dilate it every day, but and it'll probably bleed a lot, and you'll have to get several reconstructions and repairs, and revisions. But each one of those we can charge your insurer $30,000 to $70,000 each. So it's like, let's do this thing.
I like the ones that grow hair on the inside.
Have some cancer drugs.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
no,
so
no, they don't even use.
Case,
they don't even use.
The point isn't to communicate.
Be able to have the conversation.
Transitioning is always bad. It's to be able to have the conversation. The point is, right, and I want to sort of move on from the pluses and minuses of transitioning and how it applies to individuals and everything, to
what you're allowed to talk about. There's a guy on
talk about and how it was enforced.
There's a guy on YouTube named Dr. John Campbell. He's a doctor of nursing, right? Very, very well respected. Wrote 2 big, huge textbooks, right? And he doesn't make any money from his channel, and he just talks about health and stuff. But of course, since the pandemic, he's been talking about COVID a lot. And he has he's just uploaded the visuals for a poster that he says, you can download the JPEG for free and print it up yourself. And he says, I wanted to say, I think ... therefore I am. But then he scrolls down and it says, when I'm allowed to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. I
That's
watched
the
that.
hard part. And if you look at what Twitter's been doing, and when you're allowed to, it really is insidious. It's not just like I've talked about tweets getting removed, and I've talked about getting locked and suspended for saying specific things, and they'll tell you you have to delete this or you have to delete that. But that's
Yeah.
not all that's been happening. So you look at the second and third Twitter files. There are some other things that they did that were pretty insidious, and one of them was the topics blacklist.
Oh yeah.
And that's one if you had certain words in your tweet, certain phrases in your tweet, they just made it less visible. So
Yeah.
your followers didn't see it come up in their feed. If you tweeted to a hashtag, it was sort of buried in the hashtag and people couldn't find it in the hashtag. Even if a shitload of people were retweeting it,
Yeah.
things that would have like 5 retweets as opposed to your 50 would get pushed to the top of the hashtag because they were hiding your thing with your 50. And then they also blacklisted hashtags.
Yeah,
So,
well, and that's not shadow banning, Hannah.
right. That's not
that's
shadow banning
visibility filtering.
And so just imagine, like I made a hashtag women's actions matter. And it sounds like a feminist hashtag until you think about what it means when you say women's actions matter even when they do bad things.
Yeah.
Right? When a woman beats her child up, it matters. Right? When a woman chooses to be careless with birth control and then whines that she needs the right to kill her baby because she didn't want it, that matters. Like the actions matter. She's now put another human being in that circumstance, and it's inconvenient for her, and she wants a concession, against our norms regarding violence against other people. And her excuse is, well, it's still inside my body.
Yeah.
Right? And that's basically abortion in a nutshell. You have less than 1% of cases that are therapeutic for health conditions, and like even less of those cases are life threatening, and you have less than 1% of cases that are in regard to sexual abuse.
Yeah, rape or incest.
But yeah.
The rest
and
is just
the other
convenience.
98% is all elective.
It's convenience.
Right, it's convenience. And so
I don't want this baby right now at this point in time with this man.
And
Done.
the debate should be able to happen, right? Do women's actions matter? Does it matter if the reason that she wants to have this abortion is because she was careless and she put this child in this situation of gestating inside her body? Because we have to be able to talk about, is it a right or isn't it? And what responsibilities does that right come with? You have a right to self-defense, right? But you don't have a right to actively seek out conflict with other people, start fights with them, and then in the middle of the fight, declare yourself a self-defender. You don't go to a bar and start getting.
Are you saying that the mom picked a fight with the fetus with fighting words?
Fighting words, yep, pretty much. But if somebody breaks into your house and assaults you, it's an entirely different situation than if you go to a bar and you start spouting off at people. And you find the biggest, drunkest dumbass you can find that's known for responding violently to things that they don't like when people say them. And you say all the things they don't like, and then they hit you and you hit back. That's not the same situation at all, right?
No.
Yeah.
And so we have to be able to talk about that.
It sounds like you're saying she was asking for it, Hannah.
She was asking for it. I think unprotected sex is asking for pregnancy. Nature says yes about 20% of the time if you don't stop it from saying yes. And but in any case, you talk about that. You talk about two-way domestic violence and the fact that women are most likely to be injured, not in circumstances where it's just the man who is violent and the woman is just the victim, but in circumstances where she has initiated violence and the man is defending himself or retaliating. And the reason is obvious. It's less controlled in that circumstance. It's not something that he is doing that as it's reactionary instead of an action that is and not necessarily planned, but he had a second to think about it before he did it. And reactionary violence is always less controlled than violence where you're the primary actor, right?
Yeah.
And it's more wild. You're more likely to take wild swings. You're more likely to push, hit, or kick harder than you intended to. And you can talk about that, but what if that gets throttled? What if that gets suppressed? What if the Trends blacklist gets rid of those words and phrases, and you're talking about it when the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization is up, because it gets reauthorized like every 2 years. You're trying to get it changed.
Is it every 2 years?
2 years or every 4 years? But
4.
I know it's there was one in 2012, one in 2014, and I think one in 2018, and there was one this year. So I don't know if it's every 2 years or every 4 years, and they just did an extra one at one point.
Well, 2012 they reauthorized it. They did the Republican bill.
Yeah, I know. Which, like, it's
which
still,
ungendered. It's still not a great bill, but it ungendered a whole bunch of stuff, right?
Yeah,
every
didn't
single
get rid of the Duluth model, though.
Every single feminist at the National Organization for Women called it the bad bill.
Yeah,
we need to stop the bad bill. You know, the only reason why
sounds like the big lie.
The only reason why the Republican bill was passed is because the good bill, allegedly, that the feminists wanted, the Democrat bill, had misappropriations in it, illegal appropriations. They were they literally, without any kind of following of administrative law or getting authorization from the Office of Budget and Management, or Management and Budget, or any kind of notice and comment from the public, they decided they were going to insert this illegal clause that said that fines for domestic violence, right, would go to women's battered women's shelters.
Yeah, they can't do that.
Yeah, no, they can't. They can't do that. And but they were going to actually expand a whole bunch of stuff for women, and only women. Basically, they were going to make immigration fraud on the part of women super, super easy. It was already easy enough, where you're a mail order bride, you marry some guy, he brings you over to the States, you get your green card, then you say he beat you, and then you get to live in his house,
and he doesn't.
And he doesn't. He has to move out, and there's a temporary restraining order, and then you get half of all of his shit, and then he has to pay you because he sponsored you, so he's responsible for you, right? And so he just gets to pay forever for that blissful 2.5 months that you guys spent together in the same house. Well, you thought that she really liked you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that actually, I remember when they were advocating
to women
for
too,
that.
Though.
Yeah, but I remember when they were advocating for that, and I thought, geez, this is tricky.
Oh no!
But they never
be like wide open for abuse, and then it was okay. So that's
actually something that does happen.
In 2012, right? I'm in Washington, D.C. at the False Allegations Summit, and there's this woman there, and because they had just been, all these men's rights activists had been lobbying on Capitol Hill, right, the day before, And they had this woman there, and she was a victim of this type of immigration fraud. She was like, I lost my house. Like I'm paying for this guy to live. And, and it's just like, it's a nightmare. And they said that they brought 7 guys and 1 woman who were victims of this shit to Capitol Hill. And the woman was the only one that anybody from any party wanted to talk to.
Of course. Because, women. And that's another issue. Like we don't get listened to by the mainstream media. We don't get listened to by the establishment media. We don't get listened to by politicians. We don't get listened to by religious advocates. We have to be able to use social media to get our points out and get our, like, we hear a lot from people who are mad that MRAs use social media that to talk about these issues and everything, right? Which they're not considering the Overton window. And to explain for the layman, the Overton window is basically the small area of
permissible discourse.
Permissible discourse, thinking around a particular topic that is considered normal. That you say, well, popular opinion has it that blank. Popular
and then
opinion
you have
it that you don't beat people up for being gay, right? Popular opinion has it that gay marriage is okay right now. Popular opinion doesn't necessarily have it that you should convert children in school. So they want to move the Overton window.
Yeah,
there,
no,
right?
The Overton window is just like what is permissible to debate, right? And everything outside the Overton window is like off limits.
Now,
so you're not allowed to talk about it.
You're
right?
not allowed to talk about it, or people will argue with you if you talk about it.
They'll get very angry.
You can move the Overton window, with logic and reason, and I hate to use the term talking points, but talking points do work.
Yeah, and persistence.
Persistence. Even catchphrases and memes have an influence on the Overton window, and it may be different with different people as well. But in terms of like the social standard, like the general population, control over that is very important in politics.
Oh yeah.
And so if we're on social media talking with people and we are able to get across that, hey, we're not arguing that it should be okay for one sex to beat the other. We are arguing that it should not be okay for either sex. And that means that both sexes should have a right to defend themselves. And it also means that both sexes should have a responsibility to control themselves.
Yeah.
And that pisses people off right now. But more and more, we're seeing people recognize that, hey, if that attitude were to reduce domestic violence, then it's the one that we should take. And that's pissing off the domestic violence grifters a lot. Like they hate it. So they respond to us with this idea that by discussing these topics on social media,
we want women to get beaten up. Yeah.
We are not engaging in any kind of activism. Like that it's not activism to talk about stuff. Well, yeah, as long as there is an Overton window, it is activism to talk about, especially hashing out ideas that are contentious and where things are not settled, and where the position things are in right now are actually causing social ills and doing harm to individual people in large groups. Like that's what the point of social discourse is, right? And so when we see things like this, like and it was I think her name is just pronounced Bari Weiss.
Barry.
Is it Barry Weiss?
Barry
like Barry
Weiss.
White, like Barry White, but not quite so deep.
Yes.
But she, in the second Twitter files, she talked about Twitter's secret blacklists. and she revealed a lot of this stuff, and it really was quite enlightening, not because we didn't know that stuff was happening, but because we didn't know the scope or the methods. And this was quite interesting. So they did this visibility filtering. They did these blacklists of topics. They did blacklists of people. Like an example is Dan Bongino. You couldn't find him by using a Twitter search. If you searched for his name, Twitter didn't tell you about his account. And that was a real pain in the butt, because he has a site that's sort of a replacement for the Drudge Report. So if you look at the Drudge Report and then you go look at his website, which is just bongino.com, you get a totally different spectrum of links to different news articles. And I find interesting stuff there. But I couldn't remember. I kept thinking, oh, it's the something report, right? The something report. And I would look for the site and it wouldn't come up because that's not what it was called.
Yeah.
And but it's Bongino report or something like that. But so I'd look for, because he has it linked in his profile, I'd look for his profile. And even though I was following him, I'd start to type in his @handle, and it wouldn't come up for me to click on.
Yeah.
So I would literally have to do the thing where you click on your own profile and then you replace it with the name that you're looking for, or you scroll through for the last time you retweeted that person, because you can't find him. And I kept thinking, what the hell? And well, that's what the hell. They put him on a search blacklist so that people couldn't find his tweets.
Yeah, no, it's freaking crazy. Like some of the shit that they did.
Right.
And did anybody watch Tucker Carlson the other night?
I haven't watched TV in 4 days.
Apparently, okay, because we know that James Baker, right?
Yes.
James Baker, the former general counsel for the FBI, went and got a job as deputy general counsel for Twitter. In, I think it was June or something, 5 months before the 2020 election, right? And so apparently Tucker Carlson did some digging, and he found that there were, in the sort of the executive offices, right? 15 former FBI and CIA officials working there.
15.
Yeah.
15.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So what we had at that time was, like, Dan Bongino is very definitely a Republican.
Like forget about
a populist Republican.
Forget about the weekly meetings with the FBI. They had 15 freaking former FBI and CIA officials working in upper management at Twitter.
And they were specifically censoring people that they viewed to have opposing viewpoints to the existing regime and to the bureaucracy in Washington. So they were censoring dissenting speech. That's a huge big deal. And I'm going to skip us ahead on this because before we leave, I want to talk about the big contentious thing, the banning of the president during the end of his term. And this is something that the tweets are back. You can see them. Like his account's unbanned, so you can actually go back and see that the narratives that we were told for 2 years were false. And I was sick during that time. I actually had COVID. I was holed up in a room by myself with nothing to do but be online, and not enough energy to write anything. Just following what was going on Twitter. So I saw the tweets in real time. I had retweeted those tweets, so I knew they were real. And this is one that just this is part 5 of the Twitter files: removal of Trump from Twitter. Like, you saw the stuff going on. There were videos being posted in real time of the protests and the people going into the White House and everything. And it was chaos. So getting the information as to what was really going on versus what the media was saying and the pundits were saying and everything was very difficult unless you were able to find and follow people that were involved and people that were on site that weren't hiding parts of the story, which was also difficult. And when they started saying that Trump incited it, and I started looking through his tweets and looking at his speeches and everything, going, no, that's really a stretch. Like that's a beyond saltwater taffy stretch. Like where you have to stretch it and the machine that stretches it like rolls it up and wraps it over itself to stretch it. Like that's insane. And the narrative is still being said. But in order to promote that narrative and preserve that narrative against the evidence, they had to remove the evidence.
Yeah.
Right. So they could criminalize an outgoing top official in the United States government, like the absolute executive, and they can do that. Right. What do you have if you are in a situation where you've been falsely accused of a crime and you have evidence that proves your innocence and you want to share it on social media? You can see that I didn't do this crime in location A because there is video of me spending 8 hours on either side of this alleged incident at location B many, many miles away. Right? You want that up there. You want people to be able to see it. You want it to be undeniable because then the court can't ignore it without looking stupid or dishonest.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You want to have that up. But they can take it down and say, well, you violated policy. You were inciting violence against your accuser.
Oh God. And what I find, like, even if you considered it dog whistles, right? Okay, well, Kamala Harris, right? Oh, they should, they're protesting and they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. They're not going to stop after the election, and they shouldn't stop, right?
Yeah, that was pretty blatant.
Yeah, and okay, so
especially after the fiery but mostly peaceful protest.
Yeah,
right.
After 574 freaking riots. Right? And
after
she's saying this.
Billions of dollars of property damage.
Dozens of people killed. Right? Dozens of people killed. And thousands of cops injured. Right? Okay. And she says this, and they're not going to stop, and they shouldn't stop. Right? And she makes no distinction between peaceful protesters and rioters until more than 100 days after Minneapolis burned. Okay? More than 100 days after the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis burned to the ground, was set on fire.
Yeah.
Okay? And she makes no distinction. She's promoting bail funds to bail out protesters, right? Does anybody think that in Minneapolis at that point in time that any cop had any time to arrest any peaceful protesters and put them in jail?
Yeah.
Right?
No.
Did they think? Does anybody think that there was any room in any Minneapolis jail for non-violent protesters?
Right.
Right? Okay. So she was promoting a bail fund to bail out rioters, criminal rioters. Okay. She didn't say criminal rioters, but you know what? Trump said American patriots. He didn't say January 6th insurrectionists. He said American patriots.
Same thing.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, no, but it's not the same thing when Kamala, she's like, hey, bail out these protesters who happen to get arrested wrongfully because it's just they threw some Molotov cocktails and then beat some guy half to death. But, they were just peacefully protesting in a mostly peaceful but fiery protest.
So what I want to point out about this is you had the Biden administration actively working to censor the opposition, right, at that point. And that's not the only thing. I mean, you also had the Biden administration actively working to censor information that came out that would have been a scandal.
You mean the Biden campaign?
Yeah, the Biden campaign prior to the election.
Yeah,
but,
and the deep state regime.
At that point, the deep state regime was already loyal to Biden. This is something else that people don't understand.
They wanted rid of Trump like
Iron
crazy.
Maiden Paul is back on Twitter as well. So if you look for him on Twitter, let me see if he's on as his name. I think he might be on as a Voice for Men. So I'm gonna actually point that out just to be sure.
While you guys are doing that, I'm gonna read out the super chats and super chows, and I think I'm gonna have to take off because Lindsay is gonna be waiting outside.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to take off soon too because I have a splitting fucking headache.
So here's what I got. Meredith G, through the super chows, gives us $5 and says, HBR Talk 231, honey for the badgers. Thanks for the interesting conversation. Thank you, Meredith. Appreciate it. I do have a Rumble rant from NovaFan21 for $1, and he says, notice how society and quote unquote the science says nothing's wrong with how emotional women speak, but the logical women somehow have a problem.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
it's logic that's the enemy, really. So.
Yeah. What I'll say about the conflict between emotional women and logical women is this. Emotional women do have a tendency to treat logical women speak as if it is invalid and an attack. And that's where the problem comes in, especially if there is a misunderstanding. You can't even ask them to explain what you misunderstood. And if you are misunderstood and you try to explain yourself,
they just get madder.
They just get madder.
Upset. Yeah.
And they score keep. And it makes things worse. So Paul Elam is at real Paul Elam, just all one word, but those three words mashed together. So if you want to follow him on Twitter, he hasn't gotten a lot of his followers back. So definitely look him up and follow him.
All right.
I might just do that.
And then Catherine Scully gives us $5 Canadian through Super Chat and says, hey, Hannah, I have always felt the same. I also have autism. And then Gary Thomas gives us $5 and says, hey, Hannah, I'm a millennial with autism, and I often find the overly emotional language my fellow millennials use difficult to understand too.
Thank you guys. That's comforting because I do a lot of times feel like I said, it's just I'm completely out of the loop.
Man, every single human emotion that people express, right? Like, oh, it's so wonderful to be together for Thanksgiving, and all of that. I'm just like, blah, barf, right?
Well, it helps that so one of the things I had to learn how to do in order to survive my asthma was not get upset when I should get upset. You can't panic over the suffocation that's taking place during an asthma attack, because if you do, the asthma attack will get worse.
Yeah.
Yes. So there was that. That made me, I think that probably it pushed me over the edge in terms of autism. But are there more super chats? Well,
there's one more that just came through. Derek Workman gives us $5 and says, all emotional speech considers logical speakers as invalid.
That is a good point. And
Mhm.
I've experienced that. Before we take off, I really want to emphasize the point about the banning of the president, and that situation, that was not just a political dispute that spilled over into abusing Twitter policy and everything. That was establishment entities silencing a dissenter. And we
Yeah.
are up against a host of establishment entities that are grifters, that there is a lot of money in what they do. And I'll go back to White Ribbon Australia, because everybody knows of instances where they have done this, right? But when I was writing about the 7 years in hell story, I was up against a local agency that is like that.
Yeah.
And Artemis House actually sent people to court with the accuser that cornered me in the hallway at one point and told me they were going to go after my children
Yeah.
for being part of that case. That they knew that I was hanging out with an abuser, and therefore my children were in danger, and they were going to report me to Child Protective Services.
Yeah.
People who will do that, that is a form of vexatious litigation. It's not using the courts directly, it's using another agency that uses the courts, but it's still vexatious litigation, right? These agencies do this habitually. It is their method of operation to engage in vexatious litigation when they do not have a legitimate case.
Did you ever
So
remember?
if they can use the rules on the platforms where you can have your conversations, where you can push on the Overton window to silence you so that you cannot contradict the narratives that they exploit to make their money, they will do it. And that is our situation where
They'll do it. And
and they're the
do you
ones
remember?
that had me censored on they and the vexatious litigant herself were the ones that had me censored on Gather. So this is something that is very important to us, that this kind of thing doesn't get tolerated, that something we are able to expose it and eliminate it, because otherwise, like, our power is in the ability to influence how the general population thinks in a way that makes it impossible for legislators to do the wrong thing and have no backlash, no consequences, right? And we can't do that if we're not allowed on social media.
Mhm.
Yeah. No. Do you remember, speaking of child services and all of that, right? Do you remember? Do any of you remember watching that video? It was in a courtroom, and it was an appeal court panel of, I think, 5 judges, and there was like the head legal counsel of child services, and she's explaining to the judges that the child service workers weren't aware that they weren't allowed to lie under oath in court, and
What?
they should not be.
Oh my God.
They should not be held accountable, and the judges are just looking at her like
I'm
she's
sorry,
grown a
everybody
second
is
head.
everybody
Right?
is aware that you're not allowed to lie in court. Like, that's fundamental.
Like, but like, she literally made the argument, and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it was like some of the shit that goes on, and all of these people who are like, Trump, he had 60 lawsuits, they were all thrown out because they were garbage, and it's like, yeah, no, they were thrown out before they even got to discovery.
Right.
Every single one of them. There was no exchange of evidence, nothing. They were all thrown out on technicalities, right? Because nobody wanted to touch the radioactive poop.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. So
Jesus.
the upshot is, even though we're seeing this discussed on Twitter and in the establishment media, even in the
We're still radioactive poop.
yeah, right. But even though we're seeing this discussed all over as an issue between Democrats and Republicans in the United States, we have to understand this also as an issue between authoritarian censors and people who want to debate ideas in the public arena so as to facilitate vetting law and policy ideas for benefit or drawback to the public. And that's what we do. So we have to keep an eye on this, and we do in our own. It's in our own interest. It's in men's interests for censorship to be as rare and as reserved as possible, so that these issues can be discussed. Because you can knock down bad ideas with good logic, but if everything is censored, then the good ideas get knocked down with the bad ideas. And you can't knock down the bad ideas because you can't confront them.
Yeah.
So, but I think with Brian needing to go, we should probably call it here.
All right.
So thanks to everybody who listened. Thanks to my co-hosts for coming on to talk about this issue. Thanks very much, Brian, for helping me out. And thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. And good night, all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.